I'm Shar Banerjee, and this is Books That Built Me. I'm an ex-executive turned to leadership coach specializing in people managers. My job is to get people out of that manager headspace and into their leadership growth space. Typically, I work with clients to build their leadership DNA and their self-leadership muscles in either group programs or one-to-one coaching. But on this show, we dive deep into the stories of other leaders. And it all starts with a book that they believe has fueled their passion, has influenced their decisions, and now these book lessons are life lessons. Welcome to Books That Built Me. This episode, we're going to be talking about the 15 commitments of conscious leadership from the Conscious Leadership Group with our guest, Jenny Tryansky. You will be surprised to know that the first half of this episode, we actually are only talking about the first 40 pages of this nearly 350-page book. This book is split into two main concepts. One where we talk about above the line and below the line thinking, which we get, very, very deep on in the podcast. And the second part is getting deep into the commitments. A little shout out towards the commitments. We don't get into all of them, but just to give you a good feel of what the commitments are, some of them include taking radical responsibility, learning through curiosity, speaking candidly, practicing integrity, living a life of play and rest, excelling in your zone of genius, and one of my favorites, exploring the opposite, which is one that we will actually get into in the episode. Otherwise, I am so glad that you are here, that you're joining us. I'm super excited. Let's dive into conversation with Jenny. Here we go. Welcome, Jenny. I'm so excited to have you on. Everybody, this is Jenny. She is a professional certified coach. She runs her own coaching practice and does a myriad of other great things in the leadership coaching space, including running retreat workshops, the whole gambit. So before we get into this fabulous book, Jenny, is there anything that you want to share with our audience about who you are and what you do in this world?
Thank you. Yes, I'm so happy to be with you. From the moment I met you, I think we both felt that we were meant to have this conversation and many more.
Yes.
And like you, I'm a certified professional coactive coach. And maybe that doesn't mean anything to the wider population, but it really does mean something to me and to my clients, whether they realize it or not, because the type of coaching, the framework that we're trained in is truly transformational, but very human. We really, really look at the whole human. And that's the coaching I do is whole person, whole life. So my clients come to me for all different reasons, starting points, issues, areas that they want to evolve and grow in. But ultimately, we're always looking at the whole person and all of who they are in their life. And I actually really think that relates to the book that we're going to talk about today. So I'm really excited.
So let's get into the book. So the book is the 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership, a New Paradigm for Sustainable Success. What people don't know is that I saw a little sneak peek of your cheat sheet. You've got like so many notes on this thing. This is the book that you live by. And before we get into the commitments itself, it almost sounds like there is a foundational conversation that needs to happen about what all of the commitments sit on. Like, what is the bedrock of this? Take it away, Jenny.
Okay. I will tell you, when you first asked me to come on this podcast, there were other books that came up first.
Yeah,
And
tons.
when we chose this one, I'm so thankful that we did, because as I dove back into the book itself, I realized just how much I'm using the tools, the frameworks, the roadmap that this book and that the Conscious Leadership Group, the people behind the book, what they offer. I use these tools truly every day of my personal life, both when it comes to work and working with clients, and also with myself in my own relationships outside of work. And I actually, the framework that it offers us is really how I want to live my life. I want to live my life consciously, intentionally, awake. And the Conscious Leadership Group, like they say, when we minimize drama, we maximize aliveness. And I love that, because that's what I'm all about. I want to maximize my own aliveness in my life, and I want that for my clients as well.
Isn't that so crazy? I love that aliveness is different from being alive.
because you and I are alive right now,
Mhm.
but to have aliveness in
It's a
our being alive is completely different.
totally different thing. We are alive, and we can be unconsciously alive. We can be asleep or on autopilot.
Autopilot. Yeah.
And so many people operate in the world that way. And sometimes it's a matter of survival, right?
Yeah.
Life is a lot. Life is a lot. We have a lot of responsibilities. It's overwhelming. In modern life, I mean, I hear this and I see this with my clients all the time, and same in my life. We juggle a lot of balls. We wear a lot of hats. There's a lot of responsibility. There's just a lot going on, and a lot of the time we just move through that unconsciously.
And
Um,
actually, it's like brain shortcuts. Like our brain, it is designed to take shortcuts. And by default, we live on default. The problem is that if you learn to do that for all of your life, that's where aliveness really goes to die, right? And so turning on the conscious parts of you that are that truly drive love and expansion and all, and those are things of your choosing, right? The dimensions that you want to talk about, wherever you want to go, but being conscious about where to be more alive or bringing in more aliveness. I think that's where, I mean, we're both coaches here, so we're getting pretty into it. But I do think that this is the natural human experience to live by default, and it is a gift to become awake.
Yes, to become awake to yourself, to become awake to your humanity and the habits and the tendencies, and to actually accept yourself for all of it and not make yourself wrong or bad for any of it is actually, I think, like a growth area for most of us. And I think that ultimately most coaches, when we work with clients, this is what we are. We're inviting them to become more awake to themselves, to their values, to how they want to feel in their lives and their work, to how they want to be in the world, who they want to be in the world. But I think even just the self-awareness piece, right? We're sort of in the business of helping people become more self-aware and make aware and awake choices. That in itself, that's the work. That is the work. And so I'm going to share with you actually the first tool, or I guess model, that they share in this book. And it's literally right here on the cover. Okay.
Yes, it is.
It couldn't be more simple.
My
And I
God.
share this with everyone. I've sent this to clients, to friends, to family members. Couldn't be more simple. Okay. It's a line, it's a horizontal line. There's space above and there's space below. And the way that we use this as a tool in our daily lives is that the Conscious Leadership Group and this book, basically their belief is that at any given moment, all of us are either operating from above the line or below the line. Below the line is a very familiar place for a lot of us. This is where we're unconscious. We're sort of not awake. Um, something has happened and it sends us into a place of threat. We feel threatened by, it could be anything. It could be your boss made a face, like a weird face, while you're giving a presentation. They actually give that example in the book. And
Oh, this is
suddenly,
the universal
Ew.
example for
Yeah,
sure.
it's
Yes.
it's like a little trigger that your brain starts making up a lot of stories. Oh, they
Yes.
don't like
You
what
don't
I'm
like it.
saying. I'm doing a bad job.
I'm stupid.
I'm
This
stupid.
sucks.
Yeah. Now, oh my God, my job is in
They're
jeopardy.
gonna
Right.
fire me.
They're going to
Right.
fire me. Right.
Totally.
Threat. So something happens externally that poses a threat to our ego, to our very survival, right? If you think that, oh my God, I might lose my job, now we feel threatened. And it sends us below the line. Below the line is where we are closed, we're defensive, and we're committed to being right. Committed to being right and
Yep.
committed to making others wrong. I'm right, you're wrong. It's very black and white down there. In coaching, we talk a lot about saboteurs or self-sabotage, the parts of us, even inner critic sort of is in that same category, which is a very human experience. That happens to all of us sometimes. But when we're below the line, we are completely in that mindset of sort of self-critical and critical of others. We're making up a lot of stories. It's very dramatic. It feels very serious. We're focused on problems. And we become very closed and very defensive, right? And what I love about the conscious leadership group and this book is that they normalize this experience.
Yeah.
Hello, like
Yeah.
how human of you,
Yeah, exactly. It's not a
right?
place of shame. Like,
Yes,
welcome to awareness that everyone does this and it's okay.
yes, this happens to all of us all day long. All day long, something happens, sends us below the line, right? And so when we can normalize that this happens to everybody, then we can actually bring a little bit of acceptance. And now we're not adding self-blame. We're not sort of pointing a finger or kicking ourselves when we're already down.
Yeah. Like, I should have known better. It's my fault. All of that crap.
Yeah. Well, that's blame, right? So again, we're just coming from below the line whenever we're blaming. Blame, shame, all that stuff is sort of the context that we're operating from when we're below the line. Above the line is a completely different place to come from, a different context to come from, a different mindset to be in at any given moment. And so above the line is where we are open, curious, and instead of being committed to right and wrong, we're committed to learning, right? We're really curious about what can I learn here? What opportunity is there here? So above the line, we have full access to our creativity. We're able to be collaborative with other people, right? When we're threatened and closed and coming from ego, it's really hard to be collaborative from there, right?
Yeah, because you think you're going to win by yourself and you want to put others down because you win, they lose.
Yeah. And
That's
and
the mindset.
it's all coming from threat, right? It's like
Yeah.
how human and so vulnerable of us, like when we're feeling threatened, when we close, we really lose access to being able to collaborate with others. And we as coaches know that when we are creative and collaborative, like that's when we can really offer our best, right? When
Our
we're
highest self.
open, our
Yes.
highest self.
Yeah.
And actually, there's, in the world of personal development and growth, there's so many different ideas and frameworks. And really, most of the time, we're all talking about the same thing, right? We're just giving a
Totally.
different language. So
Totally.
sometimes in mindful self-compassion, which is another paradigm that I work with and is like foundational to all the work that I do, sometimes we talk about little self and big self, right? Little self is when we're below the line. We're in that closed, defensive, scared. Really, it's like a fearful place. We're coming from fear. Whereas above the line is where we have more access. We have access to our bigger selves, our wisest selves, right? Our internal knowing, all of that good stuff, all that creativity. So the goal here, and this is another thing that I love about this book, the goal is not to live above the line at all times. The goal is to be a human being. And they say the most important thing is to be truthful with ourselves at any given moment. So the key question is, where am I? Being able to locate yourself at any given moment, right? Whether you're at work, you're at home, you're sitting at the dinner table and your spouse said something that you realize, like all of a sudden you can feel it in your body. You start to tense up, you close, right? Your heart closes. Maybe your heart is actually racing. You can feel in your body when you are below the line. And so the key question is, where am I?
Where am I?
And they say it's more important to be able to locate yourself below the line than actually being below the line, right? This is all about being truthful with ourselves, really, really being honest with ourselves. And then the next question they want us to ask ourselves is, can I accept myself for where I am in this moment?
Okay, we have to just maybe say that again and really just live those 2 points because that's critical. The number one thing that I have taken away in my decades of working is that the key criteria to really figuring it out and doing things that your younger self would be like, whoa, you did that, is self-awareness. And that points to the first thing that you said about the question of, where am I? Like, how can I locate whether I am above the line or below the line?
Yeah.
And in order to do that, you have to come from a place of self-awareness. And the second piece to what you said, which is, am I okay being here, speaks to the self-compassion that you have to have for yourself, regardless of where it is that you land. If you only have judgment for yourself being below the line, this is not going to work. If you only have high expectations that you deserve to be above the line and there is no other space for you, this is not going to work either. You've got to know exactly where you are and be okay. In fact, almost like more than okay. You've got to be like, okay, great. This is where I am. And
in this moment.
in this moment.
It doesn't mean, because nobody wants to operate in the world from below the line. Of course not, right? It doesn't feel good and it doesn't serve anyone. But when we can accept ourselves in the moment, oh, I've dipped below the line. Maybe we could even ask ourselves, what was the thing or the trigger that sent me there? Oh, that's when you can bring a little bit of understanding. It's like allowing the empathy for yourself, right? That self-compassion where you can actually say, oh, it makes sense that I dip below the line. I'm a human being. All human beings experience this. This is normal. There's nothing wrong with me. My boss had a weird look on their face, and I really care about the job that I'm doing, and I want to do a good job. And so it makes sense that I find myself below the line right now.
Yeah.
But then the next, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to say, I mean, for people who are listening who've not heard of this concept, because the line is the simplest model, period. Like, it's not a triangle. There are no interwoven circles. No, it's a freaking line.
No,
and all you have to do is locate yourself above or below. And so for people who are hearing this for the first time and have never experienced what this looks like, I want to give them some examples, because the boss example is a good one.
Yeah.
Are there other ones that you can think of, Jenny, that are sort of common to the human experience?
Yeah. I'm actually going to give you a personal example because I was thinking about this recently. And so, in our lives, we all have dynamics, especially family dynamics, right? And there's nothing like family dynamics that really put us unconscious, because in family dynamics, I'm the oldest of four siblings. There's four of us. I'm the oldest sister, but there's four sisters. And you end up, you play roles. It's the same thing at work. Everybody's playing a role. In a family system, everybody is sort of playing their roles, and you're so used to the role that you play that you can often be operating on autopilot without really having self-awareness, because everyone's just so used to operating in the roles that we operate in. And I have different dynamics with different siblings, but with one sibling, for whatever reason, we when we're close, we're really close. When we're open and above the line, it's actually really beautiful. We can really be open and create from there and really see the world in new, enlightening ways together. But when we're below the line, oh man, we are below that line. And what happens is, one of us or both of us feel threatened by something that the other has said or done, and we both go below the line, right? And from there, if we try to have a conversation from the below the line place, it's almost like two different conversations are happening. I think everybody can relate to this. Like, there's not really an open, honest, real conversation happening. It's like we're operating in drama. So this book talks a lot about drama versus presence, right? That again, below the line, we're operating in like a drama triangle they talk about. Above the line, we're operating from presence, like really being here now with what and who is right in front of us. And so I was thinking recently about a phone call that I had with this sibling of mine after we had been in a conflict. And admittedly, we both probably came to the call below the line, ready to kind of have it out. I'm right, you're wrong, in that below the line place. And at a certain moment in the call, something happened. I don't even know if it was, a lot of the time I have to be very intentional about saying to myself, Jenny, you're below the line and this isn't serving anyone. And so are you willing to shift? Which is the question that we're meant to ask. Am I willing to shift? And I remember a moment in this particular conversation when I allowed myself to shift above the line, and I could really hear what my sister was trying to tell me, and hear her experience from her shoes, from her point of view. And like, I really felt compassion for her. So this is another thing. I really feel that this model really opens us to compassion, not just for ourselves, but also for others.
Yeah.
And I softened. I really, really did. Below the line is hard and tight, right?
Yeah.
Hard and tight. And I really softened, and I was able to have a more productive responsive conversation with her.
I love
Nobody
that.
hung up. Nobody hung up
Nobody
on
hung
each
up
other,
on each other.
which does happen sometimes when we are below the line.
Yeah, I believe that. I believe that. I'll give another example. When I was listening to this book in preparation for our call,
Mhm.
I had just been through, I wouldn't say like capital C conflict, but
Mhm.
kind of a mini conflict with little kid, my little kid who did something after I, asked them not to, you know, did something because they're curious and they're little and they do these things. And I remember at the moment when I was reading this book, I was in anger. I was in anger and outrage and how could you? And we've already talked about this and all of this sort of thing. And then when I was listening to this book on a drive and the examples, the ideas, all of that kind of lands. And I remember distinctively feeling, okay, if I am a leader as a parent, that was not a good leadership move on my part. I was not being the leader that I need to be for my child very quickly. And I think that the compassion piece really, really landed for me, like not compassion for me, but compassion for the situation and for the other. In that moment, I realized, what if it's actually not about me? What if this entire exchange has nothing to do with my anger or my ego or the story I'm telling myself?
Whoa.
And what if it's actually an expression of her needs and desires and what that means for a growing kid? And so I remember very distinctively having this moment of realization, and of course then taking it to my husband. And I didn't explain the line and below the line or above
Yep.
the line,
Yep.
but it was this very conscious awakening to the level of leaders that we are being in this relationship is not at the highest level.
Mm-hmm.
And our kid deserves more.
Yes. And like, first of all, beautiful. What a beautiful experience to now carry into every aspect of your life. And, this book, it is called the 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership, but we
Yes.
are all leading ourselves. We all have inner leadership, right? We're either leading ourselves from sort of like we said, a higher self, bigger self place, or we're leading ourselves from a very small fear-based
Yes.
place. So at any
Yes.
given moment, we are leading ourselves. And so all of that, amazing. And the self-compassion piece actually is really important because
Yes.
if you're going to add blame onto now I'm a terrible leader, that's a little bit
Right.
of below the line story, blame,
So true.
shame
So
as
true. So
well.
true.
So, right. It's sort of like, okay, wow, what a great opportunity to really see what's needed in this situation. Like, what does the situation need? What's the opportunity here? What's the learning for all of us
Yeah.
here?
Yeah.
That's really an above the line place to come
And
from.
that's a great call out because there are so many parents who will go to self-blame. Like, I'm a
Yep.
terrible mom or I'm
Yep.
a terrible parent
Yep.
because XYZ. And so this piece, this nugget of like, what does the situation need of me? What
Yeah.
do we need from each other?
Yeah.
Just changing the script on that versus who's to blame here, who's at fault here, who's wrong and who's right.
Yes.
Those kind of words don't belong above the line.
That's what excites me about this book. Like they give a lot of examples and they give a lot of sort of like hand holding in a way to help you through these different commitments. They even tell you like what kinds of questions to ask above the line versus below the line, which is you just demonstrated so beautifully. And like I said, this is like a framework for how to live life, with integrity, with openness, with arms wide open, with compassion, with empathy. And yeah, it's just a really beautiful way to approach all relationship and all situations that we encounter in life. Just to finish off on the parenting piece, this is the thing about self-compassion. I'm a parent too. And as I was listening to you tell the story, of course, what am I saying over here? How human of her. Anyone would react that way because as parents, sometimes we give so much. It's a hard job. And when when our kids or the world isn't responding the way that we wanted to after we give so much, we get angry or frustrated. Like all of these emotions are normal. And so, when we can normalize them for ourselves, as a fellow parent, I would say to you, Shar, give yourself a break, right? That was a tough situation. And so that self-compassion piece, which in this book, the question that they have us ask ourselves is, can I accept myself for where I am? That's where we bring in that understanding, and we can actually offer that to ourselves. It makes sense that I've dipped below the line. Okay, so nothing's wrong with me. I know I don't have to stay here permanently. There's a shift available to me when I'm ready. And that's the other key, when I'm
ready.
right?
Yes.
So I have one more example that is sort of in the leadership workspace. And I think about this a lot. And again, it was so simple, but it really stuck with me. I was working with somebody in a leadership role in an industry that can be quite toxic. And again, this book talks a lot about drama. And when, below the line is like when everybody's just sort of operating in drama. And this person works in an industry that can be quite dramatic and toxic and gossipy, a lot of power struggle. And they came to me and they, the topic of sort of the code that they wanted to focus on was, I have my review is coming up and I think I want to quit my job. So I got very curious, right? And it turned out that this person was feeling so unseen and so unappreciated and uncared for in their job. They were so below the line, wanting to punish. Like this desire to quit the job was coming from a desire to punish them for being wrong. And that was, and this was unconscious in this leader, right? But they really were just so stuck in this below the line place of they're wrong. And, I'm feeling so threatened all the time that they were ready to quit the job just to prove that that they were right and the company was wrong. And when I pointed that out to the leader, they were a little bit shocked and they took pause. And at first I thought, oh, they're going to be mad at me. And then they were like, whoa, that is exactly how I've been operating, how I've been feeling. And that's not who I am. And that's not how I want to be. And that's not what I want to be focused on. Even just the awareness that they had been operating in that below the line energy or mindset really cracked something open for them. And then when we started exploring who they want to be, who they really are, who they truly are, when they could release themselves from the story and the problems and the seriousness of all of the fear below the line, and when they could come back up above the line, this person actually realized that they still drew a lot of fulfillment from the work that they were doing, from the team that they worked with, from all the collaboration and the creativity and all the good stuff. And that to give up the job just to prove the company wrong would have been a great detriment to themselves and to their life and to their life fulfillment. And so anyway, I really carry that story with me and what happened from there is that we weren't discounting the ways in which this person was feeling unseen and unappreciated, but they were able to change the way they were going to go into that yearly review and the energy by which they were going to interact with their boss. And the conversation was very, very different. And more than that, the person was able to go into that conversation, even though it was still a difficult conversation, from an above the line context instead of from a below the line one.
Okay, beautiful. Even to say that you've entered a meeting from above the line context is just so, I can visualize it and I think it'll take some practice. But yes, that's a thing. That is 100% a thing where you can go into a space with the energy, intention of a framework that's so clear in your mind, and you make it real with other people in the room.
Absolutely.
Whether or not they realize that's what you're doing, you can actively do that.
Well, exactly. And we know that, we feel each other's energy. We feel each other's openness. We feel each other's closedness. We feel defensiveness, and we feel kind of like when we're ready to connect and collaborate and be curious together. And we can impact the space, the conversation by being the one who shows up in that above the line context. We can't control other people, but we can always invite them into that context by the way that we show up.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So far we've talked about the two important questions. Locate yourself. Where am I? and accept yourself for being there.
Yeah. Can I accept myself for being there? And then the next question, which is the key question, is, am I willing to shift? Not do I want to shift? Because of course, most of us want to shift. Am I willing?
Okay, so this is a great point because most of us want a six-pack. Are you willing to put in the work?
Yes. And they talk about this in the book. They actually give that example a lot. And they say what you're committed to is actually like is demonstrated by the results of your life, right? By the results of your life. If you really, really, really want a six-pack and you're committed to that and you don't have it, well, then it's like, but what am I committed to? Am I actually committed to what I need to do in order to, the work I need to do to make that goal happen? Or am I actually committed to something else? Am I committed to procrastination? Am I committed to
just dreaming?
To just dreaming, because a lot of people can be, right? It feels
Totally.
really, I'm just going to sit here and dream about it instead of being active and taking the active steps to make it real.
And so I really love that you say it's are you what was the exact sentence?
Are you willing? And I'm telling you, I don't say it, they say it, and now I say it because they say it.
Are you willing?
I think for me, honestly, I think I that was a big wake up for me from this book as well. Because I think I would ask myself, oh, do I want to or do I not want to? And this is a little bit deeper. Am I willing? And you kind of can't escape, if you're really being honest with yourself, then you can't escape that question. Like, you're either willing or you're not. And like I said, sometimes you're just not. And I will ask my clients this all the time. And sometimes they're just not, because the anger or the whatever emotion kind of has them is still too big. And so that to me is, that's a sign that we need to do a little bit more being with our feelings, probably applying some self-compassion. Self-compassion isn't about just being positive. It's actually about really accepting yourself as you are experiencing those unwanted feelings, those unwanted experiences of stress and struggle and even suffering, right? It's about being kind to yourself as you experience that. So yeah, if you're not willing, okay, that means that you need to do a little bit of internal work. It could even just be meditating, breathing. For me, sometimes it's even just moving. Like, I find moving my body, going for a walk. I mean, everybody can relate to this. Sometimes when you're really caught up in something, in a story, in a belief, in anger, just going for a walk can really help move things. In coactive coaching, we say emotion is energy in motion. It has to move. So if a big emotion has you, let it move through you. So am I willing? And then when you are willing, then you really have to change your questions. You really have to rise above. You got to look at the situation with curiosity, openness, and really dropping that need to be right and make others wrong.
And by the way, you know that the answer to am I willing is no when there's complaining.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Okay, so that, for me, that is a very common universal symbol for I'm not willing to step out of this. I am enjoying being here because that's what complaining is all about.
So that's the drama triangle, which I do want to say the Conscious Leadership Group, it doesn't end with just this book. This book is the beginning to cracking you open to living this way and leading this way. Yes. And then their website is a treasure trove of resources. They have videos. They have a video that I send to everybody. I've used it in workshops.
I will link it. I will link it in the show notes.
Please link it. Yes, everybody needs to watch this video.
It's a great video.
Sometimes I'll watch it with clients in a session to really see how it lands with them and then unpack it with them. And they have these cute animations that show the above the line, below the line paradigm, but they also have a great one that shows the drama triangle, where, when we're in the drama triangle, which is all below the line, we're sort of operating from either a hero, victim, or villain. That's kind of the hat that we're wearing. And above the line is it's coach, challenger, and creator. You can just feel the difference, right? Like,
okay, so believe it or not, we have literally only just talked about the first 40 pages.
Believe it, because above below the line could be a whole podcast episode in and of itself. Yeah, I know. It's that good. It's that simple and it's that good.
It's that simple. It's that good. Yes. Okay. We need to jump to the commitments
Let's
because
do it.
we have not touched on the commitments and it
Yeah.
is time.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay. So there are 15 commitments. And
Mhm.
so I think maybe what would be a really good way of approaching this, Jenny, is I'm curious about a commitment for you that stands the test of time.
Mm. So commitment one and two are the two that are the most important, again, to be able to even open yourself to the rest of the commitments. So the first commitment is about taking full responsibility for the circumstances in your life, and for your physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual well-being. Okay.
So this to me very much feels like they're saying that there is a world in which all the narratives can be to me. And by actively saying yes to taking radical responsibility, you are shifting from to me to by me, i.e.,
Absolutely.
I own and take full ownership of myself, my thoughts, my actions, and everything that comes from that.
Absolutely. 100% responsibility is really what they invite us into. And I will tell you, as a former, like as a person who used to be driven by my victim, my internal victim, this one took me a long time to
It's hard.
really, it's hard.
It's
It's
hard.
really
It's
hard
not
to take
easy.
100%
For
responsibility.
sure.
But when you do, it's actually more peaceful. It's a much more peaceful place to operate from.
It is.
And and it allows you to really step into the second commitment, which I think really is the one that's very meaningful to me. Which is I commit to growing in self-awareness. I commit to regarding every interaction as an opportunity to learn. I commit to curiosity as a path to rapid learning. And I think, most of us who work in the sort of personal growth, personal development space, we like to look at everything as a learning and growth opportunity, even circumstances that are really yuck that nobody would invite into their lives or want. But we know that these things happen, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Here's another question for you, because I'm actually curious about the commitments that surprised you, that you may have kind of glossed over, or maybe it just took you by surprise and it is actually very surprisingly meaningful.
Mm-hmm.
What
Well,
occurs to you there? Yeah.
so there's one of them actually that I am really playing with right now because I'm
Yeah.
feeling like I'm really needing to embrace it more in my life and in my work right now, which is commitment number 9, which is I commit to creating a life of play, improvisation, and laughter. I commit to seeing all of life unfold easefully and effortlessly. I commit to maximizing my energy by honoring rest, renewal, and rhythm.
Mm.
I can't tell you how much that commitment is beckoning to me at this moment. When you commit to creating a life of play, you can't take everything so seriously. And
Right.
my default mode is to take it all seriously. Like again, to be tight and serious and maybe
Me
even a little
too.
controlling.
Oh, that sounds familiar. Hi, nice to
Yeah,
meet you.
nice to meet you. Yeah. And so, and actually, they give for every commitment in this book, they give you the commitment above the line and below the line. So, what I just shared with you is the commitment I personally right now want to commit to above the line. But listen to what it sounds like below the line. I commit to seeing my life as serious. It requires hard work, effort, and struggle. I see play and rest as distractions from effectiveness and efficacy. Sorry, efficiency. Effectiveness and efficiency. So, how many of us have actually been committed to that, right? Committed to seeing everything as serious. And in the book, they talk a lot about how in a work paradigm, everything can feel so
So
serious all the
serious.
time, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they really want leaders to bring this ease and play, this idea of like play and lightness, even into the most serious conversations. And they talk about how amazing it is, how it really shifts the energy in the room and invites collaboration instead of people operating from like, again, the very like tight right and wrong problems and blaming. It really helps you see what's possible and what opportunities exist when we're not kind of taking it all so seriously.
Okay, this is an out there question for you, but I'm going to ask it. I'm
Sure.
picturing a really, how do I say this? like a dinosaur organization where there's cubicles, there's no light, everyone's kind of, stressed out, there's hushed voices. And so let's say that there is an employee who's listening to this podcast in particular and as well says, I would love a life of play. I would love a life of rest. But if I act playful here, or I show the truest form of myself, which is playful and silly and all of that stuff, I will be known as the corporate clown, or I will not be taken seriously in my job. I won't be on the roster for promotion. They won't really be thinking about my name.
Yeah. I hear exactly this in different versions all the time. So this takes a little bit of let's come above the line together. It's going to take a little bit of cracking oneself open, because the question really, like, that sounds like a lot of story you're making up there. That's a lot of assumptions and story that are coming from fear. How do you know? What's your evidence, right? What's your evidence? And so, and actually one of the commitments, commitment 4, is I commit to saying what's true for me. I commit to being a person to whom others can express themselves with candor. And in order to do that, I have to express myself with candor. It's a very vulnerable thing to actually lean into these commitments. It's a vulnerable thing to shift the energy in the room where everybody's being so serious, and to invite people to be a little bit more playful, or to become more playful yourself. It's a courageous thing to do. But in order to see any change, we need to disrupt something, right? We need to be able to disrupt what's here or how it's always worked. Same thing like my sibling dynamic. We need to be able to disrupt the status quo to see anything change. And I will tell you, I did write down some radical questions that I love from this book that I thought I could offer people.
I would love to hear it. Let's hear your radical questions.
Okay. Yeah. And they're only radical because they're not the typical questions that we ask.
Okay, well, let's hear them.
Yeah, when we're operating in the status quo, we're really not being very radical.
Yes.
So what if there is no one way the world should or shouldn't be?
Okay, pause. And I just wanted to say, the thing I wanted to talk about was commitment 10, which is exploring the opposite.
Oh my God, I can't believe that I was going to talk about that one as well. And
to
I was going to talk.
Yes. To me, that's like a game-changing commitment.
Okay. We're going to talk about that because I even have an example, a really good example. I use it in my work all the time.
The commitment 10 is exploring the opposite. And so below the line is I commit to believing my stories and the meaning I give them as the truth. And above the line, exploring the opposite means I commit to seeing that the opposite of my story is as true or truer than my original story. How wild is that? Like, whatever my story is, I commit to seeing the opposite to be just as true or more truer. And I recognize that I interpret the world around me and give my stories meaning. That to me is the game-changing commitment. So you said that you had a story that was like, let's hear it.
So first of all, when I read this commitment in the book, it was a beautiful, almost like it was a surprise to see this year, because this is actually based in the work of Byron Katie. And they say in this book that they've drawn on a lot of different ideas and concepts that are out there. Byron Katie her framework is called The Work. And if you go to her website, they give you all like a whole roadmap for how to use the work. And this is the most, like you said, eye-opening moments is when we can ask ourselves to take a look at the opposite of our own story. So I use this with clients all the time. And recently, a client came to a session and they were feeling really down on themselves, a lot of blame and shame about, I dropped the ball on something. I dropped the ball and they were feeling really, really terrible about that. And like in full self-criticism about the fact that they dropped the ball. They hadn't followed up with someone, and it was like this person has a lot of integrity, and it just was like, oh, I'm so disappointed in myself. Okay, I dropped the ball. So I started getting curious about, well, who else was involved in the story? And they started telling me like the whole story. And it became clear that, wait a second, you're very stuck in sort of a shouldn'ts, and a lot of self-blame. And so I asked them, well, what would be the opposite? So your belief right now is I dropped the ball. What would be the opposite belief? Well, the opposite would be they dropped the ball, the other person who was involved. And at first, my client was sort of like, but that's not what happened. And I'm like, what did it? They dropped the ball. Can you be with that for a second? What happens when you actually look at that as being the just as true or maybe even more true than the story you're committed to? And so again, so the person took a second, it took a few breaths for the person to open their mind. And then finally they said, well, actually, yeah, they dropped the ball. There was some story there as well. And actually, that maybe is as true. And the point there wasn't to now start to put blame on the other person. By exploring how the opposite could be just as true or more true, it actually helped the person be with the situation from a totally different context, from an above the line context. It actually had them have more compassion for themselves and more compassion for the other person, and just compassion for the situation in general, that like, hey, balls get dropped in business all the time.
Yeah.
And honestly, by the end of the session, just by using this little tool, they weren't really in, there was no blame, there was no right or wrong. It was like, that happened, what are we doing next to move on?
You know why I love this is because it gives you such a practical way of having an intensely different perspective.
Absolutely.
And to me, life, the work that we do, the meaning we put to it, all of it lies on the shoulders of perspective. And so the real practical tidbit for me in this one is it's so polarizing, right? Like it's instantly the opposite of what you believe is 100% or more true than the story you're telling yourself. Now force yourself to live that, and you see things differently, because what's happening is you're getting off the shoulders of the perspective giant that you decided to climb atop of, and you're climbing up the ladder of a new perspective. And it might be challenging, it might be hard, it might almost feel impossible, but you'll get there. And the vantage point and the viewpoint from that place is wildly different. In fact, you can probably look at your own perspective from this new perspective, and the wisdom that gets created as a consequence of that. I think that's the game change for me when I read this commitment. I'm like, yes, everyone should try this out.
Yes, exactly. I think wisdom is the whole goal here in general. How can we look at the circumstances right in front of us and create some wisdom for, like, which is really a learning opportunity? What's the wisdom here? What's the opportunity here that I can take forward into my life so that I can lead myself and others more consciously?
And here's the thing about wisdom. Most people think wisdom is gathering around a really smart, wise person and listening intently as they speak and feeling them, impart knowledge on you. Yes, and there's another version of wisdom that is actually within you. You know the answer to all of the problems. The problem is sometimes you're not clear on what the problem is.
It's true. And the problem is also oftentimes we're unconscious and we're just committed to being right, and we're just not cracked open enough to be curious about who and what is right in front of us and what opportunities exist, right? When we can just like rise above the ego. Below the line is all about the ego. It's all about the drama. And when we come up above, again, this is where we can maximize our aliveness in our lives.
Yes. Beautiful. Okay, so I interrupted you. You were talking about radical questions. The first question was so radical, I just had to jump in. So,
and so the follow-up, the question there is, what if the great opportunity in life is learning from whatever the world gives us? So no matter what happens, good or bad, we like to put labels on things, good or bad. No matter what happens, what if it's my great opportunity to learn from whatever happens? It doesn't mean you need to be grateful when something terrible happens, but it does mean that you can recognize that, like, wow, there is a growth or learning opportunity here. And I'm going to embrace it to the best of my ability. We take learning, there's wisdom to glean from everything. And so what if the great opportunity of life is in learning from whatever the world gives us? It is radical. It's radical.
It is radical.
But I really think it feels right. It feels true. It feels right to me. And from there, the last radical question that I love is, instead of who's to blame or how can we fix this, what can we learn from this and how can we grow? Right? I wonder what this is here to teach me. Wonder is a shift move. If we want to shift from below to above, get into wonder. I wonder. I mean, there's nothing more curious than like, I wonder what's here for me to learn.
Yeah. And the wonder, I think, forces curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
The wonder forces you to go above the line.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I have to do a shout out to the end of the book. It spoke to the nerd within, and they literally give you a formula for change. It's called the change formula. This part, you and I haven't talked about this part, Jenny, but this part I capital L love. So just so everybody knows what this is the expression for change, which is V multiplied by D plus Fs, which is greater than R. And so this whole thing, and Jenny, this speaks to me because I am a scientist at heart. And so if you put a formula down, I am listening. I'm all in.
Gosh, Shar, I am the complete opposite. Put
Really?
a formula in front of me and I'm shutting down. I'm below the line. I'm not a math person. I'm a creative. It's funny, right? We're
so
why
different.
Different frameworks, different language speaks to different people. But I want to know, what do you capital L love about this?
I capital L love that it puts so clearly where we get stuck in change. Because this point about, at the start of our episode, we're like, everybody wants a six pack. Are you willing to put in the work? Those are two vastly different questions. And so this whole concept here is like V times D, which is the vision for what you want to create. And D is the dissatisfaction that you have in your life right now. So the vision for what you want to create, like that could be, I don't know, call it 10 points. And the dissatisfaction could be 1 point. Like it just varies from person to person. Most people can, just have a single solitary vision and then have like 100 units of dissatisfaction and then jump for change, right? Versus others may have 100 units of a vision versus like a single moment of dissatisfaction is not going to rattle that vision. It's like, it's not enough pain to move forward. But what I really love about this book is they've introduced the idea of FS, because FS stands for first steps. So regardless of what's happening with your vision and your dissatisfaction and the sort of the relationship between the two things that are happening, in order to overcome resistance, which is the R, in order to overcome the resistance for change, you've got to take a first step, FS. So it doesn't even matter if the first step is, in 10 orders magnitude, or you've actually achieved something because of the first step. No, the simple radical action of doing something different is in service of change. And I love that they introduced that, because that is so real. How much of our lives do we spend in our brains, right? I'm picturing a beautiful future. I'm angry about current situation. And then so what? It's that first action of doing something that you've never done before that initiates the cycle of change, that gets you over the resistance.
And what's
change.
happening there is you're moving from victim to creator.
Yeah.
And that I think is what we as coaches are always trying to help our clients do, is to really have some agency, make decisions that are aligned with who you really are and what you really want for yourself, right? The vision, and how you want to feel in your life. And then taking those small steps with agency, like that I actually have agency to make change and to make that vision a reality by taking these small steps. And now I'm the creator, and you're actually actively creating something with each step that you take.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. This is the creator is born out of first step.
Yeah. And guess what? Even, in that, we can also still challenge ourselves. Like we can, we don't want to be a victim, and we don't want to be, in their model, they talk about a hero, but not a hero in a good way. The hero in the drama triangle is about, they say it's about, when we're giving someone a fish instead of teaching them how to fish, we're just kind of giving them some quick relief, like a quick hit of, I'll just do it for you. Right?
Yes.
That's not helpful to anyone. So the above the line version of that is being the challenger. where we still want to challenge ourselves and other people. But again, from that place of agency. Below the line is like we are powerless, and above the line, we are in our full power.
I love that. Instantly thinking of so many examples. It is easy to play the hero, like, I'll do it. I'll win the trophy. You think I'm amazing. Awesome. I'd love to play that part. Versus the challenger of what's stopping you? What's getting in the way of thinking creatively? And that's a harder question to ask.
Yeah.
It's way easier to be celebrated and to have that temporary boost. Is it serotonin, the boost? I'm not sure what it is, but you do get a boost of something when somebody thinks that you're an amazing quote unquote hero. But real victory, real learning comes from challenging, comes from coaching, comes from
and
creating.
challenging. That's right. And we can do that for ourselves. Like in my self-compassion work, one of the biggest misconceptions of self-compassion is that it has us rest on our laurels. No, when we care enough about something, when we're dissatisfied enough about something and we're ready to make change, we will challenge ourselves because we care about it. And so that's where we want to come from, not because we're berating ourselves or telling ourselves we suck. We really want to take those steps from a place of, this is unknown. I can't control the outcome, but I believe enough in my vision, and I am dissatisfied enough that I'm ready to make change. Right. And you can kind of coach yourself through that experience of taking those steps, because you care. You have to recognize, you have to have the self-awareness to know that you're dissatisfied and that you care enough about this thing that you're willing to take those steps.
You know what? And maybe we'll end it on this note, because if you've heard this entire episode and that tickles your fancy, like, what does it mean to coach myself? I'm just going to say, go to page 316 after you read this book, because it lists it out for you. There is a title called Are You Willing to Change? And there are, I think, 20 questions. 20 questions that once you read, you cannot unthink them.
Absolutely. And I will say, if reading them doesn't work for you and you want to hear them, or you want, go to the website and go to their resources. It's you're going to link the website. The resource section is beautiful, and I'm very grateful to the Conscious Leadership Group for providing it. I really think that this is a model that is going to create change in the world. If everybody could show up this way, if everybody could commit to these commitments, or at least explore them, open themselves to them, I think we'd be living in a very different world.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you for joining us today, for all of your beautiful insights, your amazing stories, all of the color behind the text. Because that's the thing with books, is that it can seem daunting and there's a lot of black and white, i.e. text. But what really brings it to life are the stories. And thank you so much for the part that you've played here today to make all of this so accessible to people who have never heard of this book, or kind of picked up this book and maybe forgot about some of the lessons or two.
Yeah, thank you. It was so much fun to talk about. And I will say, I'm still learning. We're always learning, right?
Same.
So
yeah.
I am if anybody ever wants to chat about what it is to step into these commitments and continue to learn, get in touch. I'm right there with you.
That's awesome. Thanks, Jenny.
That's it for this episode of Books That Built Me. If you've enjoyed the episode, please take a moment to leave us a review. It really helps support what we're doing here. Thanks for listening, and you can always find me on my LinkedIn at Shar Banerjee. If you're dealing with a leadership challenge, I would love to hear from you and have you join our community. And of course, I will talk to you next Tuesday on a brand new episode of Books That Built Me.